So the workshop today is about early intervention, the importance of early intervention. Now, we all know that language is at the center of all children's learning and development, and we want as many children as possible who are delayed in their language and development to catch up with their peers. So, what my mission is to educate parents to raise awareness of the need for early intervention, for the need of to access services to support their children's learning and development. So, who am I? Right. So my name is Aqua. I've got a master's in psychology. I studied childcare in the UK, and I am a trained teacher. I'm trained to teach biology, and I am the founder of Attached SC Consultancy Limited. So I have worked with children and families since 2005 in different capacities. I have been a volunteer creche worker, and I still volunteer in our Sunday school in church today as a Sunday school coordinator. I have worked as a childminder and a project worker with the Children's Society, supporting children who are bullied in school. So I worked at an anti-bullying project, and right now I'm working as an early years practitioner, an assistant practitioner in a children's center in Oldham. Now, in my family, like I said, I've got four children, two of whom had a bit of a speech impediment. Now, my second daughter spoke late. She started speaking at 2.5 to 3 years old when she went into nursery. But then I didn't know anything about early intervention. I didn't know anything about language development. I didn't know that there was support available or that I could access support. So I did the things that I did to support her were done um, unconsciously because I was a childminder. I had lots of early years toys at home, so she played with these toys. I encouraged her to we just played together. So I was unconsciously supporting her to develop her language without realizing it. And my last daughter as well had a speech impediment, and she could talk. She talked early, but she had a lisp, and she had some speech sound disorder. So some of her sounds she could not pronounce, so she struggled with some of the sounds. And we access speech and language therapy. How did I get to go into speech and language therapy? I will tell you about that later. So today, that's my family. So today, what I'm thinking that we'll go through is we'll look at definitions of language delay. We'll look at how I got myself into what I am doing right now. I'll look at some circumstances, individual circumstances, and what we need to do if we are worried that our child is delayed in their language development, and why we need to seek help early. And then I'll give you um, contacts of where you can get support if you are worried about your child's development. What is language delay? Language delay is a type of communication disorder, and your child may have language delay if they do not yet meet their language developmental milestones for their age. So children are supposed to be are meant to say certain things at certain times. They're meant to communicate in certain ways at certain times. We'll look at the developmental milestones later. But if your child is not doing what they should be doing at their age, then they are delayed in their communication. So their language abilities may be developing at a slower rate than most children, and they may have trouble expressing themselves or understanding others. So if you're giving your child an instruction and they don't understand you, or if they're struggling to say something you and they don't have the words to use, then they may have a language when they should be able to. So if a 4-year-old cannot tell you, "Mommy, I want food," or "Mommy, I need a toilet," then you should be worried that because they should be able to say things like that at 4. So language delay may happen if they may have language delay may involve a combination of hearing, speech, and cognitive impairments. So hearing in the sense that if a child cannot hear, then they will not be able to speak because they will not be able to perceive the stimulus of speech, and they will not be able to respond. So if a child cannot hear, then they will not be able to respond. And as such, we always recommend that you do a hearing test for your child if you're concerned about the language development. So contact audiology to request a hearing test. So language delay may involve hearing loss. It may involve speech. Speech is the sound that we make for the words to come out. So they may be able, some children may be able to understand but not be able to speak. So that is expressive language. And they may have cognitive impairment. So they're not mentally able to do, maybe they had a brain damage or trauma or something that prevents them from talking when they should. So language delay can be receptive, so what you can hear or not hear, expressive, what you can say or not say, or a combination of both. So, what are the causes of language delay? A lot of people ask whether it's genetic, a lot of people ask whether it can be treated. So, what causes language delay? So, it could be an oral impairment, so something that is mechanically wrong with the physical mechanisms that children use to speak. So, they may have a cleft lip or cleft palate, or they may have a tongue tie that prevents them from moving their sound in the mouth. So that is oral impairment. So it's a physical thing. It may be a hearing impairment, as I said earlier. They may not be able to hear, or they may be losing their hearing. Or premature birth also can cause a language delay because the child is not fully developed to be able to develop the different areas of their brain to for speech. It may be an intellectual disability as well, so which may be caused by learning disability. So a child may have learning disabilities that prevents them from understanding language or expressing themselves. And another thing could be several psychosocial issues. So, for example, the environment in which the child grows up in. If a child is growing up in an environment where they do not hear language, they do not hear people talking, they do not hear words on a constant basis, then lack of stimulus will cause them to be delayed in their speech because when children are born, they have to have their brain needs to be stimulated, and the language center of the brain also needs to be stimulated. And how does it get stimulated? By words, by music, by what they hear in the environment. So if children don't have the right environment, if then it's not conducive for them to learn the language, then they will not be able to learn the language. So, and children who are abused or neglected also usually fall back in their development and language development as well. Another cause of language delay is autism. So I'm not going to go into autism because this presentation is not about autism. This is about language delay, simple language delay. So a child may have all the capacity to speak, but they're not speaking. So we're just talking about language delay and not any other neurological problem. What are the signs and symptoms of language delay? So I'll just give the headlines because I've got another course that covers this in more detail. So common symptoms of language delay include not babbling by the age of 15 months. So when a baby is born, by the time they're 3 months, 4 months, they start cooing and babbling. Obviously, their first mode of communication is crying, and after that, they start smiling. They start engaging in babbles back and forth with the parents. So, if a child by 15 months isn't babbling or saying single words, but first few common words like milk or dada, mama, things like that, then you should be concerned. If they're not talking by the age of 2, if they're not saying any words at all, then you should be concerned because at 2 years old, a child should be able to put at least two words together to make a phrase like daddy gone or more food and things like that. So if the child is not yet saying any words at all at 2 years old, then you should seek help. Another symptom is the inability to speak in short sentences by the age of 3. So by the age of 2.5, 3 years, a child should be saying, "I want milk" or "Daddy gone work." So they should be putting three words together, 3 to 4 words together in short sentences. If they have difficulty following directions, then you should be concerned. If they have poor pronunciation or articulation, then that is a speech disorder. So they may be able to speak, but their language is unclear, or they may be pronouncing some words wrongly, or they may sometimes when the beginning of a word is difficult, the child will just skip the first letter of the word and just continue. Like for example, instead of saying banana, they'll say nana. So they'll find the easiest way for them to speak and use that. So we have to model the right way to say things. So another thing that we can look out for, if they're omitting some words in a sentence. So a child may be speaking, but they'll skip some vital words in a sentence. Then you should be concerned and ask and seek help. Right. So why am I doing the work that I'm doing? Why do I? Why am I advocating for early intervention and language delay? Like I said at the beginning, I have 2 daughters who, at some point in their early years, had a speech impediment. One spoke late, but I wasn't aware that she should have been speaking by 2 years, 2.5. I didn't know anything about early years. I didn't know anything about language development, and I didn't know what to expect. I had an older daughter, but she spoke. So it never occurred to me that children are meant to speak at different um, ages. So in the end, she spoke, but I didn't seek help because I didn't even know that there was help out there. I didn't even realize for 1 second that she had a problem. And lots of parents are in the same position. Sometimes they think that parents think that, well, a child is delayed in the talking. They'll talk when they're ready to talk. Oh, they're just lazy. So we have all these different kinds of beliefs about language development. But if we know the norms, the expectations of a child at different ages, then we will be able to find out what we can do to help them. So the second daughter, not my second child, my last child, who had a speech impediment, like I said earlier, had a lisp, and she modeled her sounds. So there were certain sounds that were difficult for her to um, articulate. So how did I find out about speech therapy before accessing it? We were attending a program at school, like a stay and play program after school at their primary school. And during this program, the program was called FAST, Families and Schools Together. It's been a while since we did that. So during those sessions, they would invite different practitioners to come and talk to people like firemen, doctors. And on one of these days, they invited a health visitor. So during our conversation in the session, she noticed that my daughter modeled her sounds. And she said, asked me if she had been assessed at 2. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, she hasn't had an assessment. And so she talked to me about the 2-year assessment that children are supposed to have, which my daughter was missed. She didn't have one, and she was then in nursery. She was 3 then, and she told me about speech therapy and that we could access support for her speech disorder. So I'm like, bring on the support. I wasn't aware that there was anything like. I wasn't even aware that you could do something about a child who is delayed in their language development. So she put in a referral for speech therapy. We accessed speech therapy, went to speech therapy. They took them into the room, did the activities, came back, gave me a sheet of paper. This is your homework. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? So, but we were not told how to do it. So just repeat these words, practice these words and this and that and the other, just model them to her. So nobody really showed us what to do. So I went home, did what I could do with her, and thankfully she is fine now. But one thing, this is why I am so passionate about this thing. The fun of it was I was working at a children's center. But I wasn't aware that at the other centers, which were run by the Children's Society as well, they were doing this early intervention program for language delay. And so when my eyes were opened that my daughter was delayed in her development, I was talking about it to a colleague, and she told me that yes, we run sessions for speech and language delay in one of our other centers. And so I got interested, and I asked to go and shadow. So I went in and shadowed it. And then a couple of years later, speech therapists came to our children's center to do clinics where parents who are concerned about their children could come in, drop in, and talk to them to give them advice or to do an assessment to see if they really needed speech therapy or to refer to the early intervention program. So I asked to go and shadow them, and they accepted. So I went in there, watched what they were doing, saw how they interacted with the children, and it was so fascinating. So eventually, I was asked to start running the early intervention program in our children's center, and I ran that for about 4 or 5 years before I left that children's center. And it is what I still do today. Run, do early intervention. And today, I do assessments as well as run early intervention programs. So that is how I found myself in this line of work. And I've done trainings specifically to support children who are delayed in the language development, as well as train parents to be able to support their children at home. So I am very passionate about this topic, and I want as many people as possible, especially in our African community, especially in the Cameroonian community, to to access the services that are available. Because sometimes we're sent letters or we're giving information about things that would help our children, but we do not access them. Sometimes because of fear of I don't know what. But if you have a child who is delayed in their learning and development, please access help. So that's how I found myself in this line of work. And I've been doing early years since 2005. So I am like, this is what God has called me to do on this earth. Work with children, play with children. I'm surrounded by children everywhere I go. So, yes. So, where are you right now and where are you going? What are you doing in your personal situation? Do you have a child who is delayed? What are your goals? What would you like support with? What are you receiving as support at the moment, if you are receiving any support? And in the next 1 year, how do you want to support your child? How do you want to see them develop? We need to be asking ourselves these questions. So, and why is it important for you to seek help for your child? We need to know. And if we are unable to do the support ourselves, are you seeking help? Because it is not only enough for us to know that our child is delayed, we need to actively seek help for them. So, my desire and my prayer is that anybody who has a child who is delayed in their language development should seek help. We are in a country where help is available. Yes, services have changed throughout this COVID, but there is still help available. So, think about these questions. What is your current situation? What do you have or do you have a child you're looking after? So, what kind of support are you receiving at the moment? What are your goals for your child or the child that you're looking after? Because sometimes early intervention practitioners also join in on this video. And why is it important that you should access help? And what are the needs that you have? Do you have a need of training? Do you have need of materials? Do you have a need of resources? Do you have need of ideas? What do you need to be able to support your child at this moment? So those are questions that you should ask yourself and see if somebody can help you answer those questions if you are struggling. So our next slide is about early intervention. What is early intervention? We've looked at language delay, we've looked at the causes and the symptoms, and we've looked at why I do the work that I do. So what is early intervention? So, early intervention is a means of identifying and providing effective early support for children and young people who are at risk of having poor outcomes. So, it's anything that you can do to support a child or a young person or even a family to achieve better outcomes in life. So, in the aspect of speech and language delay, the earlier you seek support, the better for the child, because the earlier you stimulate their brains, the language center of their brains, the better the neurons in their brains will connect. And the more they hear language, the more likely they are to use it. But if we do nothing, then nothing changes. They may develop, but they'll develop at a slower rate than their peers. And when they finally go into school, they will always be playing catch up. So we do not want that. We want them to catch up before they start school. So effective early intervention works to prevent problems occurring or to tackle them head on when they do occur. So before problems get worse, we want to tackle them. If we identify them early, we want to put support in place early as possible. It also helps to foster a whole set of personal strengths and skills that prepare a child for life. So if we support a child to develop language, we're not only developing language so that they can speak, we're helping them develop language so that they can make friends, so for their social and emotional well-being. We're helping them develop language so that they can understand what is being taught in school. We're helping them develop language so that they can read and write and problem solve in school and later life. So we need to be able to put early intervention in place so that children develop to the best of their abilities. So intervention can take different forms. So it can be through home visiting programs to support vulnerable parents. So parents who need support one to one, we go in the home and support them in at home. It could be in school. So interventions put in place in schools to support the children who are behind, or in the community settings. So to improve children's social and emotional skills as well as their learning and development. So, what does early intervention look like for a child or for you as a parent who has a child who is delayed in their learning and development, in their language development specifically? So, early intervention will involve an assessment. If you're concerned that your child is delayed, then you need to have them assessed. So assessments are done play based. Everything about early years is around play. So the assessments are not going to be like put the child there and ask them questions to answer. No, it's going to be they are going to be observed. Some instructions will be given for them to follow. So it's very informal. So they need to be assessed. The next group sessions. So when they assess, then you'll be invited to join an early intervention group, usually a small group of between 4 and 6 families together with children who are at a similar stage in the learning and development, so that the work that they put together is um, for the age, it's age appropriate but differentiated for each child to meet their particular needs. So when a child is assessed, and for example 2-year-olds are assessed, one child may understand everything but they are not just talking, another child may not be able to understand anything, and so even though they are the same age, they have different needs. And so the early intervention programs that are put in place are meant to target the specific needs of each individual child. It's not global. We may be doing the same session, but the targets for each child will be different. So another aspect of early intervention will be one-to-one interventions. So like I said, home visiting, where we go into the homes, we do activities with the parents, we bring the activity, model how to do the activity with you and your child, and then you do it for the week, and then we come back the following week. We evaluate what you have done over the week, and then we move to the next activity. And it's usually between 6 and 12 weeks, depending on the need of the family and the need of the particular child, but mostly 12-week blocks that we do early intervention for. And with speech and language development, it can take Some children may just need support for the 3 months and they find some may need support for years. So each individual case is different. So it is not a blanket thing that if you do an intervention for 3 months, by the end of those 3 months, the child would be speaking and talking and laughing and shouting. No, each case is different. Each child develops at a different pace. So we have to follow what that the child's needs are. And after early intervention, then we then go to speech therapy. So in Oldham where I work, you have there's this hierarchy of to access support. So we start with the children center activities. We start with things like stay and plays. Then we start with specific groups for speech and language, like Little Talkers, as it is in where I work, and the or home learning real programs as well. And then uh, um, if after 3 months of intervention we still find that there's a lot of delay, then we refer to speech therapy so that they can have one-to-one access. So they'll go for another assessment with the speech therapist, and then um, they get on the list. So it is a hierarchy of interventions that they go through. But some parents may want access to private support, which is why I'm doing the work I'm doing, because sometimes you access you do the assessments and the child is put on a waiting list, and there's a long waiting list, especially with what has happened in the past couple of years with COVID. Children have not been able to access early years provision or support as they would normally have with when things were normal. So there are very long waiting lists at the moment. So sometimes up to 12 to 18 months your child may be waiting for intervention. So hence the gap that I want to bridge for parents who are able to afford private support. There are also other private, obviously private speech and language therapies that you can access around you. Right. So the reason for this presentation, why is early intervention important? So early intervention is likely to be more effective when it is provided in earlier in life rather than late. So the connections in the baby's brain are most adaptable when they're young. So in the first 3 years of life, that is when the connections in the baby's brain are most adaptable and can easily pick up things. Like we said, children's brains are like sponges, they absorb a lot. So when a baby is born, they say proverbially like they're born with half a brain. So they have all the mechanisms there in their brain to function, but the neurons, the things that that carry messages in the brain, are not fully formed yet. So they have to be stimulated in order to function properly. So if we stimulate the physical area of the brain, then they develop physically. If we stimulate the emotional area of the brain, then the neurons are formed better and the child is developed emotionally. They have a secure attachment to you as a parent, and they form good social bonds. And if the language brain, in the language center of the brain is stimulated as well, then the child develops the language better. So we want to get support in place early. And as you know, as an adult, you know that things that you've learned over time is very difficult to unteach some of the things that you've learned already. And it's harder sometimes for us as adults to learn new skills, which is why early intervention is important. Get in there while the children are young and are still able to absorb as much as possible before they go into school. So it is very important to start early, because of the brain development aspect of it, they absorb more in the first 3 years of life. So these connections, which are neural circuits, like I said, are the foundations of learning and behavior and the health as well. So over time, these connections become harder to change. So the more the neurons are set in place, the harder it becomes to change the patterns of connections in the brain. So we want to put in the language, want to stimulate the language center of the brain with as many words as possible. Talk, 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 talk. Never stop talking to your child, so that the brain is stimulated, so that they can pick up, develop these strong connections. And why is early intervention important? It works. That's the simple truth about it. It works. So early intervention services can change a child's developmental path and improve outcomes for children, families, and the community. So the more children we are able to support to reach their full potential, the more they can have good life outcomes for themselves, for the families, and the communities. So we want to put support in place as early as possible. So early intervention also helps your child or the family. So it does when we put early intervention in place, it's not only about that child, it's about the whole family, because if one part of the family is struggling, the whole family is disrupted, because everybody is affected. So because if a child cannot express their needs, if the child cannot tell that this is what I want, this is I'm hungry, or I need a toilet, they're just crying and crying and crying, and you have to constantly guess what they are trying to say. Then it frustrates everybody. They are frustrated, you are frustrated. The family dynamic is not right. So families benefit from early intervention by being able to better meet the needs of their children from an early age. So the more you access early intervention, the more you pick up the skills to be able to support your child at home as well. So we want everybody in the family involved, even older siblings. Right. So now that we know what early intervention is, now that we know what language delay is and why it is important to seek help early, what do you do if you are concerned about your child's development? So the process of early intervention is different from, or the process to access help is different in different countries. It's different in different parts of the UK where I am. And we need we need to know what support is available. Now, the local authority has a duty of care for all children. They need to put support in place for them. It is a mixed one, because development is an educational thing, but the support for speech and language therapy comes for speech and language development comes through the NHS, through the health service. So it's a mixed thing. So the therapy comes from the health, whereas the educational aspect comes from the local authority. So sometimes it's difficult, and to merge these processes, they have to communicate. But what you need to do if you are concerned in the UK, or where I am in the Northwest, you speak to your health visitor. Each child has a health visitor. But if you do not know who your health visitor is, talk to your GP. GPs also refer to, they can tell you who your health visitor is, or they'll refer you to speech therapy themselves. So the earlier you get an assessment done, the earlier support can be put in place for your child. So if you're concerned, speak to your health visitor or your GP, or talk to us. We're here to help as well. If you're concerned about your child and you know you've spoken to your health visitor and they're planning an assessment, or if they've done an assessment and they've told you that, okay, this is where your child is, maybe you're waiting for speech therapy, but what can you do at home? What can you be doing in the meantime? How can you help your child at home? The first thing to do is to create the right environment for communication. What do I mean by the right environment? Sometimes we believe that if we buy lots of toys and put them around in the house for the kids, oh, we've done our bit, they have toys they can play. No, that is not enough. Creating the right environment means that you remove as much of the distractions as possible, because children who are delayed in their language, they're sometimes delayed, struggle with concentration and attention. And we want our children to concentrate and focus to be able to learn. So Remove as much distraction as possible. Now, we encourage that you play with your child one to one, at least 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour a day if you can. Sometimes it's not often possible, but where you can, have that one to one interaction with your child. Now, why is this important? Because as you're playing with the child, you should be talking to them, commenting on what they're doing, giving them the words that they need to describe their environment. So we want you to play with your child, and when you're doing this, part of creating the right environment is to remove all distractions like TV, your phone, tablets, and the random toys that are lying all over. We want you to bring out one set of toys that you can focus on so that the child is focused on one thing at a time. Because when we have too many toys around, they're jumping from one thing to another. You may have a doll over there, you may have a toy food here, you may have cars, you may have train sets, you may have a kitchen, and the child is jumping from one thing to another as the attention is triggered. So we want you to focus on one thing at a time. So get one set of toys at a time and put them out. Pack everything else away. Turn off the TV. Take the tablets off. Put your phone on silent and focus on that particular activity. Another thing you can do is read books. Books are very good for language development. Now, a child who is struggling with their language development may not, or who is just two, may not be able to sit to read a whole book. What we need to do is give them access to the book. Give them a book, look at the pictures in the book, allow them to turn the pages, talk about the pictures, talk about what you can see, talk about what they're interested in, because they'll point at different things that they're interested in. And don't be fixated about starting a book and finishing the book. So just give them access to a book. Make up stories. Uh, oops, sorry. Make up stories in the books that you the picture with the pictures that you have in the books. Another thing you can do is sing lots of songs and rhymes. These are very good. Songs and rhymes are very good to develop language because as they listening to the rhythm, they're picking up the words, they're picking up the patterns, they're picking up the sounds. So songs and rhymes are great for language development, especially those that are repetitive. So ones that have specific words repeated over and over again, those are very good because children learn through repetition. The more you talk to them, the more they hear a word, then the more likely they are to use it. And sometimes a child may need to hear a word up to 50 times before they'll ever use that word in talking. Make use of free local services. So, for example, your children center activities like stay and place. I know that lots of them have been um, stopped during the COVID, but you make use of your local activities. Make use of the park, make use of your libraries, make use of mother and toddler groups in your church or community centers. So, there is a lot of stuff available out there and people are not accessing it. Make use of your local services available for you. They're free. If you don't use them, they'll be taken off. So you might as well use them. And most importantly, talk to your child about anything and everything. Talk to your child. Never stop talking to your child. You may think that, oh, baby doesn't respond back, but you need to talk to them because you're stimulating their brain. The fact that they're not responding to you doesn't mean that they're not absorbing what you're saying. Like I said earlier about the brain development, the more you talk to them, the more the connections are made up in their brains. The next step. So, what do you do now if you know that your child is delayed in their development or you need support? Like I said, contact your health visitor or your GP. And if not, send me a direct message if you're struggling to find out um what services are available in your area. Just send me a direct message. We've got a community Facebook group called Speech and Language Champions. You can join our Facebook group because I put on little tips and videos here and there in the group so that people can access, give you tips or strategies that you can use at home. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Attached Consultancy, or you can explore our website, www.attachedsc.com. So If you have found this useful, then please give us feedback so that we know that we're doing something right or wrong, so that we can change and improve. But my goal is to get to as many parents as possible. Now I'm going to tell you about some of the services that I offer privately. So I have created a course that as a parent you can do on your own. If you buy the course, there are just 4 modules. So looking at what language delay is, looking at the causes, the signs and symptoms, and how children learn language. What are the steps or how language is developed? What are the skills that children need to be able to learn to talk? So on that course, you look at all these things and then you look at strategies that you can be using at home, and you come alongside with some activities, suggested activities that you can use alongside with each of the strategies so that you have something to focus on when you're playing with your child. Another thing that I do is I do a group session for children who are delayed in the language. So 4 to 6 families together, we do activities together for 6 weeks. So giving you the skills that you need to support them and modeling how to do it in the session. So that each week we look at one strategy, practice how to use that strategy. You go and use it at home, and then you come the next week, we look at another strategy, practice it, and then you do that for the next 6 weeks, and then you can continue using it at home. I also provide one-to-one intervention for families. Another course that we provide is a course that we do together. 7 week course is provided by another company, but they trained me to be able to deliver the course. It's called an Elkland Let's Talk with Under Fives. It is a very practical and hands-on course. You come in, we do look at different things in the session. We look at what communication is, what kind of skills you need to communicate. We look at interaction, what good interaction with your child looks like, what a bad interaction looks like. We look at strategies to support your child as well. We look at things like unclear speech and how you can support your child who has unclear speech. So that course is called Elkland Let's Talk with Under Fives. Ping is a parenting coach. In my day job, I support parents with things like potty training and behavior management and things like that. And some parents just need that person to encourage them. So I do things like that. So that is what I do as an early years practitioner. And I hope you have found this session useful. So I would love some feedback. Please send me a direct message or put a comment in the comment box. And yeah, go. Thank you for watching.